Hey, Nelson, alcoholic addict. That's not my real name. That is my fake name that I use here at my newsletter. I just got done watching the new movie Deep Water, and oh boy, let me tell you, it is a wild, wild ride. In case you're unfamiliar, it is a new Ben Affleck, Anna de Armas movie on Hulu right now. It is an R-rated erotic thriller. I will give you a brief plot summary, and I don't think it's a spoiler because it's in the trailer and on the posters and everything else. So here goes. I'll keep it brief though. Ben Affleck and Anna de Armas are a married couple. They have a marital relationship where she openly flirts and has affairs with other men right in front of him and all of their friends in the middle of parties. And then the men start disappearing. And I'll leave it at that. The movie gets crazier from there. It's worth a watch. It was a hell of a fun ride. And I'm writing about this on my sober blog because it reminded me of some things, especially at rehab, and what I learned about dysfunctional relationships once I got sober. It was my experience that as a raging addict and alcoholic, I created lots of dysfunction myself, but the dysfunction can be an infectious disease. People around me got swept up in the dysfunction themselves sometimes, and pretty soon, every dynamic in my life was a disaster. The weird thing, lots of my relationships bent toward the dysfunction, and the dysfunction became functional. That's what happens in deep water. It's normalized bizarre behavior. In my life, I stayed married. I stayed employed. I stayed mostly welcome at family gatherings. In retrospect, it's really strange and unhealthy how many people in my life ended up adjusting to my dysfunction. And it often encouraged some dysfunction of their own also. So we had just dysfunction everywhere. And I was the one creating most of it. What do I mean by that? Let me give you one example. When I was a hardcore user of drugs and alcohol, it was between maybe 2005 and 2008, my financial situation turned into just a dumpster fire. I was married, and suddenly all of our money was disappearing. I'm transferring balances from credit card to credit card. I'm trying to take out loans with banks, and then I'm getting loans from family and friends instead when the banks were rejecting me, telling my wife about some of the loans and not telling her about others. And my wife was experiencing all of this without the key information that I was spending probably $1,000 a week on painkillers and booze. And she's seeing these bills and the phone calls, and she's getting alarmed. But ultimately, she just adjusted. It just became the norm that, like, wow, like, we're just always out of money. What happened to last week's paycheck? Why is this collection agency hounding us? How are we both working and we're spending so much more than is showing up in the bank accounts? She just got used to that. That those questions, they were all just a part of our lives. And my dysfunction had spread, it reminds me of water on a sidewalk, it finds the cracks and it keeps running. I would show her some credit card bills and not others. I'd have all sorts of explanations for what I thought was going on. I would write out math equations on paper and show it to her, and it was just all lies and confusion and fake noise. But it's amazing how functional I made the dysfunction become. And in Deep Water, Ben Affleck and Anna de Armas are just, they kind of get used to having a mess of a relationship. It becomes normal. And then it's especially striking in the movie to see like all of their friends are just like, well, there they go again. These guys are ending up dead or missing. And the dysfunction had become functional. I guess that concept, I'm talking about it like, oh, it used to be a part of my life. It translates into sobriety too. I'm occasionally a little chaotic to be around, that's for sure. And that chaos can spread, Luckily, it's mostly harmless when I'm working a good program. The kind of dysfunction that I spread the most these days tends to happen around 8:30 in the evening when my 7-year-old is laying down to read stories and go to bed. And I decide, what would be great right now? a jiu-jitsu match. Just me and her. Let's wrestle. My wife, let me tell you, she loves that. She absolutely loves that. But hey, I guess getting a kid wound up, that's slightly better than having to murder a bunch of people that we're cheating on each other with. So thank you for letting me share.